Hey guys, it's God's Comic Brad Stine, and as you know, I always bring up the craziness that only the leftists can come up with. Let me ask you this question. Have you always believed that logic and reason is pretty much a human experience that we all can participate in? Well, nowadays, we have people that telling us that logic and reason is racist, and that it's really kind of a white Euro-Western concept, and so consequently needs to be seen as oppressive. Does that sound ridiculous to you? Is it possible that logic and reason could be racist? Whatever your take is on that, write it down below. Let's talk about this. This is important, logically. Okay, I have a very spooky philosophical question for you. Have you ever spent time thinking about what you think about? How about thinking about why you think the way you do? In other words, you have a set of presuppositional ideas that you believe to be true, and you use them as foundational truths to help you navigate the world you inhabit. Because everyone must have a basis for what they have accepted as established foundational truths that they're going to live their lives by, those standards then become what is called your worldview. Unfortunately, over the last decade or two, a new concept has crept into the cultural exchange that has literally upended what used to be essential for cultures to thrive and to even be able to communicate and find out some common ground. The concept is the questioning of logic and reason as established access to reality. This illogical concept is a mixture of Darwinian ethics, which, by the way, will always lead to the dehumanizing and eventual corruption of the dignity of humanity, and instead reduce us to mere animals with no more ultimate value than a slug, and the Marxist idea that humanity has historically simply been a battle between the working class and the owner of production. You're either oppressed or you are oppressing. There is nothing in between. And the very notion of what might interest you and your future to assist you and your family is being controlled by those who built businesses and countries. Because of that starting point to evaluate culture, it is inevitable that certain specific groups of identities will be singled out as having been the most oppressed, which by default means we have to find an evil oppressor to have done the dirty work. But in order for any ideas to be evaluated, we have to at least have a shared access to truth that reveals itself through the eons-old proven technique of logic and reason. How could anyone question the value and necessity of logic and reason as one of the many unique human tools that make us unique in the universe and that no one has questioned, that is, till now? A philosophy and religion professor at Syracuse University gave an interview to the New York Times a few years ago in which he critiqued the notion of pure reason as simply being a white male Euro-Christian construction. Professor John Caputo was being interviewed by fellow philosophy professor George Yancey in an interview series Yancey conducts with philosophers regarding racial topics. He said this, and I quote, "Given its emphasis on first principles and abstract thought, it may be tempting to view academic philosophy as a turf where the race of participants matters little." But Caputo says that's entirely untrue. In fact, race is of central importance, and it's proven by the mundane phrases philosophers use. White is of the utmost relevance to philosophy, and postmodern theory helps us to see why. Caputo says in the interview, "I was once criticized for using the expression true north. It reflected my nordocentrism," my critics said, "and my insensitivity to people who live in the southern hemisphere." Of course, no such thing had ever crossed my mind, but that points to the problem. We tend to say we and to assume who we are, which once simply meant we white male Euro-Christians. The end result of critiquing whiteness, Caputo suggests, is the realization that the supposed reason underlying philosophy is just another form of white privilege, or something of that nature. And I quote, "I think that what modern philosophers call pure reason, the Cartesian ego cogito and Kant's transcendental consciousness is a white male Euro-Christian construction, he says. White, it's not neutral. Pure reason is lily white, as if white is not a color or is closest to the purity of the sun, and everything else is colored. Purification is a name for terror and deportation, and white is a thick, dense, potent cultural signifier that is closely linked to rationalism and colonialism. What is not white is not rational. So white is philosophically relevant and needs to be philosophically critiqued. It affects what we mean by reason, and we, white philosophers, cannot ignore it. Folks, please tell me you don't actually need my analysis to reveal how absurdly racist and destructive this idiotocracy is. Anytime a color is used to describe a point of view, it's racist. Literally, there is no other word for it. I taught you this in a previous episode, but it bears repeating. Leftist academics who claim to be the champions of tolerance and equality are by far the most blatant racists we see on a regular basis. They always utilize framing an idea or perspective in a color used to describe the miscreant. The absurd book White Fragility is a prime example. Please allow me to remind you of what I said previously in case you think I'm defending whiteness. And if that's what you're thinking, then you are actually proof that this episode is necessary to expose another poisonous corruption of age-old wisdom, destroyed by elite academics whose only mission, it appears, is to use convoluted, unproven perspectives, couched in impossible-to-understand nomenclature, to fool the rest of us into buying into their nonsense. I'm not defending whiteness because whiteness doesn't exist. Actually, the opposite. Let me again go on the record that white has never accomplished anything in human history, ever. Oh, and also we need to understand that black has never been oppressed in human history. These words are colors. Colors don't think. Colors have no mind or perspective or philosophy or grievance. Using colors to make a point is a lazy and disruptive placeholder to confine a group of people that fit a category that has nothing to do with the history of the world. The moment you land on a color to broad brush a group of people, you are categorizing and diminishing them to a group identity without taking the least amount of time to differentiate each individual as unique and very likely having their own ideas and life experience that do not necessarily fit neatly into a package by which they can be defined. To include all white people as oppressive immediately equates a white supremacist whose skin color is white as the equivalent to a William Wilberforce, for example, a white-skinned guy who argued in the British Parliament for 30 years to end the African slave trade until it was finally ratified in the 1800s. The very idea that a philosopher who, by the way, descends from a white European heritage would then use logic and reason to evaluate and demean logic and reason because it is somehow white and European and thus is inherently suspect and in need of dismantling and neutralizing couldn't be any more ironic if you were trying to need logic and reason, to demean logic and reason is so delightful in exposing the shallowness of leftist thinking that it does all the work for you, and only the leftist elitists would be unable to understand it. The left, for example, created the idea of cultural appropriation as if one's culture's honoring another's is intrinsically demeaning. But what if one culture invented mathematics? Should we believe they should keep it to themselves? Or is the world a better place if we share it with humanity? I mean, is it racist for a white person to enjoy jazz music, for example, since it originated from black music culture? I mean, to admire, utilize, and lionize any form of art, philosophy, or inventiveness as a gift to humanity should be considered proof that we need each other to grow as humans. You see, when we focus on ideas and truth and beauty and allow them to live without the need to reference the color the human was that gave it to us, is the only way we as humans can become egalitarian in regards to honoring the human experience. Matter of fact, if the left would quit prefacing every accomplishment, advancement, and ingenious idea as the color the human was that accomplished it, we would get used to the idea that we are all humans. And any advancement of anyone is an advancement of all. If you're a leftist, please join the rest of us that have long moved away from color and heritage as a predicate for proof of human flourishing, and instead simply live our lives content in the fact that we are all made in God's image and contribute equally to the cultural milieu. The sooner the left leaves their racist constructs behind, they will actually be accomplishing what they have never been able to do before. Seeing the world through Jesus' eyes, where we all are literally one family. This is God's Comic, Brad Stine. And once again, it's crucial that you join our movement and remember that PC free is liberty. Hey, you are my awakened warriors. If you're watching this, it means that you were one of the beginnings of the Awakened 1000. That is the people that are actually being part of seeing the big picture of what I'm doing. You know, it's not just Brad Stine Has Issues. It's not just my Brad Stine Show podcast. It's not just my live events at comedy clubs and churches. I'm trying to say that conservatives and Christians will not be silenced. And we have to take a back door to get in because, as you know, they do kind of silence us all over social media. But I'm not going to give up the fight. I think the God I believe in has sent me on a mission, and he sent you to go along and help me. There's a lot of free content out there, by the way. Would you do me a favor? Share it and try to drive people this direction. As long as you're here every month, I'll continue to try to make you laugh, inspire you, and also defend what you hold sacred. That's what I'm here for. You can help me. Also, when you see me in your town, or you want me in your town, let me know. I'll come out there, and we will do some damage for the kingdom. Thank you for being the beginnings of this ministry that has just begun to fight. I appreciate it, guys.